Hello, my name is ctor Aranda and I am the winner of the Spanish Logic Prize. I wrote the paper Completeness from Husserl to Carnap, which was published in Logica Universalis in 2022. First of all, I would like to thank you, Logica MX, for the invitation to this video series, and I really hope that you will enjoy this video. First of all, let me start by introducing myself and talking a little bit about myself. Now, I am an assistant professor at the Complutense University of Madrid in the Department of Logic and Theoretical Philosophy, and before that, I was working at the University of Salamanca, and also I was visiting the University of Aveiro, the Department of Mathematics, and the University of California, Berkeley, and the Nicolas Copernico University in Torun. Now, my main interests lie in type theory. I am working with a team in different developments of type theory, non-classical type theory, with Maria Manzano, Patrick Blackburn, Antonia Huertas, and Manuel Martins, and we are developing a hybrid type theory, a strong version of Farmer's type theory, a strong version of a simple type theory combined with this hybrid logic. And now this is my main interest, just to work in these versions of type theory. But before that, I was focused on the history of logic, and in particular in the history of the notion or notions of completeness. This was the topic of my PhD dissertation under the supervision of Enrique Alonso. So I think that this was a really good initiative to develop a Spanish Logic Prize, and I am very grateful to the Spanish Society of Logic and Philosophy of Science, which in part gave financial support to this prize, to this contest. So I encourage you to send your papers to the new editions of the prizes of your country, because I think this is a very good way of communicating and also to meet people working on your area, and to have the opportunity to publish your paper and to also receive very good feedback, because for instance the Spanish jury of the prize was very competitive, with a lot of experts in logic working in from different sides of logic, different areas. So, and also during the World Prize contest, the atmosphere was great, and also the jury was very demanding, a very demanding experience, and also very fruitful and very enjoyable. So I strongly recommend you to take part in this contest, and I really hope that the contest will continue in the future during more years, because it is a really good idea. So speaking now a little bit about my paper and about the main ideas of the research I carried out in that moment. As you will probably know, because of your studies in logic, the notion of completeness is a very universal notion that is present in many places in logic. For instance, the completeness is a property of the theories, both in a semantical and a syntactical way, but also it is a property of the logics. You can complete that the logic is complete, and this is what we usually do with different logical systems. So this is a property which is very common, and my early interest was to to investigate how these properties, so clear delimited with these so clear boundaries, were received and delimited by our contemporary logic, and how these notions, clear notions, really appeared, and when these notions really appeared as we studied today, nowadays. And if you go to the literature, you can easily check that this is a very well-known topic. The history of completeness has been extensively researched through the years. Many scholars have already pointed out different things about these notions, about the process of this notion, how this notion was inherited by contemporary logic. Many trends have been already pointed out. For instance, the investigations of Gödel, of Veblen and Tarski, and of Tarski, of course, and Veblen, and the American postulates, and also the Hilbert school, which was really important for this topic. But I discovered that there was like new trend of thought, a new ideas on that, which was mainly the claim that the contribution of a philosopher who is always thought to be one of the fathers of the continental philosophy, which is Edmund Husserl. These contributions have also played an important role in the delimitation of these notions, many notions of completeness that we already have. And I really felt very curious of that, of this new trend of thought. I had many talks with Paolo Mancosu in Berkeley that were very helpful to me, and I started to study this new literature and to ask the following question to me: how is how we can say that Husserl is really having an influence on these notions of logic, and how deep is it, that influence? So I started to investigate it, and the paper I published was the main historical results of this investigation, of this research. So you have to take into consideration that Husserl, the contributions that have been neglected, that are now taking more and more consideration from the scholars, were published, or the conference that are inspiring this new movement were pronounced in 1901. So this was a very early moment in the history of mathematics, and logic. This was the turning of the century. So many things were not clear at all, and the notions were not clearly delimited. And for instance, remember that the Principia Mathematica were published in 1910, 1913. So the formal language of the logic, in the way we know it now, was not developed, and Husserl was not sympathetic with Frege's project. So his investigations were pretty informal in a way, and his notions were not embedded in a formal language, his thoughts. not even in a formal calculi. So yeah, you have to keep in mind this informality of Husserl's reasoning and the context he was writing. So you cannot expect to have any kind of proof or of a technical notion clearly elaborated there. So this is not there. And it was also very interesting to discover that as other scholars have already pointed out, that the conference I mentioned before about were about the problem of how to expand our numerical systems. So the place where these notions of completeness were somehow anticipated, where these notions of completeness where Husserl made these contributions, were in a context of purely mathematical context, in a context of how to expand our numerical systems. And the problem Husserl was facing in this conference was really clear, really well formulated and very precise. But before telling you what this problem was, let me say that the conference that I mentioned, pronounced in 1901, were pronounced for the Society of Mathematics of Göttingen, and by invitation of David Hilbert, because they were friends. So this is important to know the context. And if you are interested, you can find it in the compendium of the philosophy of arithmetic of Husserl, which was published in 2003, and you can find that philosophy of arithmetic. In the appendix, you will find a copy of the conferences that Husserl pronounced these days by invitation of David Hilbert in 1901. This is important to say. So the problem, going back to what I was saying, the problem was that according to Husserl, the numbers, the real numbers, the genuine numbers, were the natural numbers. The other numbers were considered like a little bit odd, and they were called like imaginary numbers. Not only the complex number, but all non-natural numbers were called by him imaginary numbers. So the problem was how to guarantee that when we add these creations to our genuine real numbers, natural numbers, how we are sure that the calculation with the previous numbers, with the natural numbers, were correct. How can we be sure that 1 plus 1 will be still 2 when we have added some odd numbers like the square root of 2 and so on and so on. So this was the problem, how to guarantee that the calculations will be preserved. And the solution, there is some agreement in the literature that the solution, Husserl's solution, was to appeal to a kind of formality of the axiom systems, of the theories of the numbers, a formal property, which Husserl called two properties: relative definiteness and absolute definiteness. So the idea is that if the axiom systems describing the numerical system, for instance the natural numbers, is relatively definite, and the successive numbers or axiom systems are also relatively definite or absolutely definite, then the extension of the axiom system can never lead to contradictions. So this is somehow the idea. Okay, a logical property was warranting us that no problems will appear. So the point with the notion of completeness comes here. The key point is that some authors, some scholars claim that behind these two notions of definiteness in Husserl's text, in Husserl's conference, there is a notion, an underlying notion of completeness. Okay, and there is a heated debate whether what kind of notion of completeness is it. For instance, Da Silva has defended that the notion of absolutely definiteness is equivalent to syntactical completeness, to our idea that if we have a theory is syntactically complete if for each sentence of its language and for its negation, or then either this sentence or the negation can be syntactically proved from the theory. Okay, and other scholars like Hartimo and Centrone thought that the idea behind this absolutely definite theory was the notion of a categorical theory. That is, a theory is categorical if there is an isomorphism between the models of the theory. So there were like this kind of competence of you have to decide which is the best interpretation of Husserl's conference, which is called Doppelvortrag in the literature. So what of these interpretations, what of these two readings are more compatible with Husserl's thought or with Husserl's intentions or Husserl's purposes with these notions? So I will focus only in the notion of absolute definiteness in this video because it's the notion I discuss in the paper. In my PhD, I also give an interpretation for relative definiteness, but in this case, I will only focus on this notion of absolute definiteness, which has the interpretation that I have already mentioned now. And this was the very briefly said. This was the state of the art at the moment. These two possible readings, and when I was preparing my PhD, I noticed that the way in which Carnap was explaining the meanings of the different notions of completeness that were somehow already delimited at the moment were very similar to the way that Husserl was doing the same with the notion of absolutely definiteness to his notion, right? So in almost 30 years later, in 1928 and also in 1925-23 with the works on Fraenkel, there was some understanding of different notions of completeness that were in play at the moment in the studies of logic and mathematics. The notion of categoricity or monomorphicity in Carnap's terminology was clear. That is, this idea of the isomorphism between models was clear. And then there were also these ideas of first or secondly non-forkability, the idea that a theory cannot be, the models of the theory cannot be extended, and the idea of decidability, but not is not clear if decidability means decidability in the way of syntactic completeness. I think that was more close to some kind of completeness of the theory with a semantical notion of consequence. That is, a theory is semantically complete if for each sentence of the language of its language, that sentence or its negation is a logical consequence of the theory. So now we are not directly appealing to the notion of probability or syntactically probability, but to logical consequence. So it is a difference with this notion, and then sometimes there is some kind of oscillation between these two notions in the notion of decidability. So as I said before, I thought that there were some clear there were very similar the explanations they offered to these notions were very similar. Both Fraenkel and Carnap explanations were very similar, and also very similar to some paragraphs of Husserl's, especially those concerning the idea of decidability, because also Husserl was not clear at all between the distinction of probability and logical consequence, which is of course very, very obvious, because the Principia Mathematica was not even published. So there were this ambiguity in all Husserl's text in the Doppelvortrag. So after checking this similarity and checking also that I also had some, in particular, there is a text by Veblen published in 1906, which I think is very, very similar with respect to his idea of categoricity, very clear, the way he explained it. The intuitions are very similar, almost identical to Husserl's intuitions. So after checking all of these coincidence, I saw that Husserl was cited by Fraenkel and Carnap. Carnap did it in the Untersuchungen, the manuscript which was not published during Carnap's life, and in this manuscript, which is not very well known by the normal public, in philosophy and even in analytic philosophy. And in this manuscript, which is in German, it was published in 2000. There are a lot of history about this manuscript, but if you want to know the details, you can go to the paper, and many of the papers that are in my bibliography that you can check it, that are only devoted to Carnap's manuscript. And then when I also saw the connection so clearly stated between these three authors, I thought that I had the core of my PhD dissertation, and I decided to exploit this way and to try to draw to sustain a good claim about this relationship between the authors and the ideas. And the main claim of the paper, and the main claim I maintained during the World Prize contest, was that the notion of absolutely definiteness that I mentioned before, that emerged in the context of the numerical systems, was proposed by Husserl in 1901. This notion was conflating the intuitions and very informal sense of three formal notions of completeness, which are categoricity, non-forkability, and decidability. So that these intuitions, these three intuitions were conflated in Husserl's notion. Okay, so the way Husserl explained how well the absolute definite theories were the same way that we explain today that a notion is a theory is categorical, decidable in this sense, and non-forkable. So but the point is that Husserl thought that, and he thought that these three properties were consequence of the main idea of an absolutely definite theory. Okay, and I think that another claim which you can check in the paper is that primarily and above all, the notion of an absolutely definite theory aims at the idea of the non-extendibility of the model of the theory. Okay, and this is the same idea behind Hilbert's axiom of completeness. We know that Husserl was very critical with Hilbert's axiom because it was considered a little bit ad hoc, and he thought that this should be just proved and not stipulated by means of an axiom. And at this moment of time, at this period, completeness was mainly a property of the models and not of the theories. So it makes sense that an absolutely definite theory is precisely a theory whose model, whose intended model, or whose domain, you have here some preliminary notions that you can also check in the paper, that these theories cannot be extended. So he started to make this shift between the completeness of the models to the completeness of the theories, and this is, I think, a merit of Husserl, and because in Hilbert's work, it will be given a little bit later, okay, in the 20s, more or less, with Bernays' work and so on and so on and so on. So I really think that this was my point, that mainly these theories, a theory like the theory of the real numbers, is a theory that is absolutely definite because the model, the reals, cannot be extended without losing some rule. Okay, so if you extend the real numbers to the complex, then you will lose the order. So this is basically the idea. And then when you have a theory like this, whose model cannot be extended, then you will have as a consequence some idea intuitive of categorical theory and also of a decidable theory and of a non-forkable theory. So this was my main contribution. I also raised some objections against Da Silva, against Hartimo in my paper, and try to give evidence in favor of my new reading. So just to summarize, the goal of my paper was to provide a new interpretation, a new reading of a heated debate, a contemporary debate, which has been published in different journals and different books. So this is a recent debate, and then I was trying to offer a new perspective, mainly in this chapter. In this paper for Logica Universalis, a historical point of view. I have other works in a more conceptual way, and try to offer a more balanced reassessment of Husserl's place in the history of logic, not saying that the notions are completely anticipated there, which I think that it is quite too much, because of the moment of the history of logic was like it was, so it would be like too much. But also admitting that his contributions were very similar to Veblen's in the way of speaking, and also that he was anticipating basic ideas that were present on Carnap and Fraenkel years later, and more important, that the shift from the completeness of the models to the completeness of the theories was partially given by him. So I think that this way of looking at Husserl contributions could be more balanced. And apart from the paper, which as I said, and you all know, is published in Logica Universalis. Now I hope in this September, late September or early October, there is an upcoming book in Spanish for all of you that speak Spanish. You can find it and read it really easily. And the book is the title of the book is Husserl, Carnap y los conceptos de completud en lógica, and it is basically the main results of the entire PhD dissertation, not only the ones concerning to the chapter that I published as a paper in Logica Universalis, but my whole work on Husserl and Carnap and the notions of completeness. The prologue of the book is written by Paolo Mancosu himself, and I think that if you are interested in knowing how the history of logic could be revisited with the tools of the contemporary logic, and how some ideas we have about the distinction between analytic and continental philosophy, these ideas how can be also questioned, and some questions also about philosophy of logic, on philosophy of mathematics, and the way that the questions Husserl raised many years ago can be now approached with our new tools, and so on and so on. I strongly invite you to check the book. Will be published by college publications in la serie de cuadernos de lógica y epistemología, and the title again is Husserl, Carnap y los conceptos de completud de lógica. And again, I would like to thank you, Logica MX, for the invitation. It has been a pleasure to record this video, and I hope that the main points have been clear enough, and that you all have enjoyed with the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.